there's a lot of these trip reports that I start off by saying, this is the most, absolutely, of all my experiences that I've ever had, the most intense, the most mind-blowing, the most earth-shattering, etc., 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 right? Say that on how can everyone be like that, right? I basically say that on every one. And then I think even once or twice I've even went as far as to say, I may have said that others were the most intense, but trust me, this one, y'all, is the most intense. I can't imagine it being any more intense. I may have said that before. Pretty sure I have. Whatever I said there, y'all, let me tell you that this one takes the cake. This one takes the taco, whatever you want to, whatever food preference you have. Cake or tacos, do a billion, quadrillion, infinity of them. And the reason why this one is the most intense, in my opinion, not only, just looking at the trip alone, it's like not only, y'all, the freaking Archangel Gabriel showed up and smote me, for crying out loud, but kicked my ass, was mopping the floor with me, painted me into the corners. But that's just the Archangel Gabriel. Then Jesus showed up, crucified, looking me dead in the face, with blood coming down his face and the crown of thorns and everything, staring at me with that 1,000-yard stare that you cannot describe unless you've seen it yourself. And we had a conversation that lasted about an hour and a half, and it was the most unbelievable thing I've ever heard or seen in my entire life. I'm going to be studying what that man said for decades and decades and decades until I die. Which is why this channel is continuing. But the trip aside, y'all, the trip aside, as epic as that was, imagine having to make a life and death decision in the middle of an intense psychedelic trip. It's like you don't have time. You don't have the luxury of saying, wait until the trip is over, sir, Mr. Doctor, right? Who is recommending that we have a DNC operation to surgically remove the embryo from my wife's womb because we failed our second ultrasound test, despite these signs and synchronicities that we had, these cry your eyeballs out, beautiful signs and synchronicities that we were going to get a heartbeat from our daughter, Julia. Go watch this episode right here if you haven't watched it. That it's a heartbreaking, unbelievably beautiful, but heartbreaking episode. That was after the first ultrasound when we were supposed to get a heartbeat and we didn't. And I was looking at all these signs and it was breaking my heart because it was all supposed to come true and it didn't. But then I started getting signs that I need to trust the signs. And so we ordered a second ultrasound. And I went in there confident as all get out because I knew the signs were in my favor and I knew it was going to work, and I couldn't wait to not only hold my baby daughter Julia in my arms, but I couldn't also wait to point at the people that didn't think it was going to happen and say, hey, I was told it was going to happen by God. And it happened. And I know that's a bit of a pride thing right there, y'all, but I think anyone who's holding out hope for a miracle kind of wants that in some capacity, and at least in some capacity, especially when you're new to God, like me. And that's the backstory, y'all. We went in for the second ultrasound, and in heartbreaking, heartrending, cry your eyeballs out fashion, once again, there was no heartbeat. And once again, we had the doctor saying, we need to move on to the next embryo, pave the way, right? He's suggesting all these different things, like let your wife's body naturally miscarry, which is a terrible experience if anyone has gone through that. The second option is take a pill that forces a miscarry, which is even worse because not only do you witness the miscarriage yourself, but you have induced contractions ahead of that. No, on either side here. So the third option is a DNC operation, which is to do a surgical, do an operation to surgically remove the fetus or the embryo, therefore eliminating any and all possible hope of there being a heartbeat. Life. a baby daughter bouncing on your lap. All of that's gone. All the hope of that is gone once you make that decision. And our doctor is looking us in the face and he's saying, this is what I recommend. My wife agrees, even though this is going to basically spell the end of life for that embryo. My wife is still fighting for life so that we can pave the way for the next embryo. And so in a weird paradoxical way, she has to fight for death in order to fight for life. But I was fighting for life, for this life, because I still trusted the signs. And I was like, hey, is there any hope for a miracle here? And the doctor was like, absolutely not, basically. But then he said, he didn't say absolutely not. He said no, but he followed that up by saying, there is the smallest chance that something can happen. It's like the tiniest. He's like, anything can happen. But he's like, more than likely, if we do a third ultrasound, we're just going to confirm what we already know. And this should be our last confirmation before we move on to the DNC operation. And so I said, okay, that's what I want then. And my wife is still pushing for the DNC. So is my doctor. And so we are literally having a disagreement and a kind of argument in front of the doctor. And the doctor says, hey, look, we can't have this here. He says, we need to make a decision by tomorrow, though, because we have an opening in our OR and we can do the surgery tomorrow. I highly recommend you do it. Let's do it. So make a decision by 2 p.m. today if you are going to do the DNC operation or if you're going to do a third ultrasound. So no joke, y'all. Literally, we have a life and death decision to make. That day, in a mere 3 hours, we have to make a life and death decision about, do we effectively terminate, y'all? Terrible timing to decide to do a psychedelic trip, which is exactly what I had in mind. The moment I saw that there was no heartbeat on the ultrasound, I thought to myself, I want answers. I was getting signs and synchronicities and these cry your eyeballs out moments with your wife, that we were going to get a heartbeat and that we were going to get a baby daughter and her name was going to be Julia and all this stuff. And it was so beautiful, and it didn't happen. It actually was the opposite of what it was supposed to be. And now it's absolutely heartbreaking. I want answers. And even my wife, who is teetering on the edge of this whole psychedelic thing, she thinks it's crap now. She was already kind of on the fence on, do I believe that stuff is really happening or do I not? And then we get these amazing signs. And she would have been a full-on believer if we, had a heartbeat and got a baby daughter. But no, that's not what happened. And now she absolutely hates the whole thought, thinks it's BS. But just like her, or just like me, she wants to know too. Hey, Andrew, go to the source and figure out what the heck is going on here. Whether it's BS or not, I want an answer. And I'm like, you're damn right. I want an answer too. And so even though it was the worst timing, I came home and I did psychedelics. I did an undisclosed amount of mushrooms. I'm not going to tell you how much I did because you honestly won't believe me based on all the crazy stuff I saw. But I did them. I wanted to start the experience off right. I wanted, because I'm fighting for life after all, and I've been praying and trying to manifest the growth of a fetus in my wife's womb. If I'm going to kick the experience off correctly, I want to kick it off with life. And so what did I do when I first started experiencing the lead in and starting to feel the pressure headache and starting to see like little swirly fractal kind of stuff? I said, I want to go look at life. And I went into my room here and I opened up the blinds and I was looking for the giant plumeria plant, the same plumeria, if you remember from this episode here, that Jesus spoke through to me. He said, I am life itself. He's like, you're obsessed with death. If you want to talk to me, you don't talk to death, you talk to life. I am life. And he embodied himself through this plumeria plant, which was right out here. But just like you're seeing right now, it's not out there. And I had this freak out moment. I'm like, oh my God, I started the trip off on the wrong foot. I was wanting to commune with Jesus and talk to life and stuff, and it's not there. I screwed this all up. And then I remembered something. Anyone who owns a plumeria knows that plumerias can't handle winter weather, right? If you live anywhere, above or below the equator where there's an actual winter, they will die quickly in such a climate, right? So when winter comes, you had to take them out of the ground, shake all the dirt off the roots, pluck all the leaves off the plant, bring them indoors and lay them down somewhere, literally. Like my wife used to lay it like on the ground in our garage, or sometimes leaning up against the wall. But when we ran out of room in our garage, she started putting it in the downstairs den right here. And that's when I remembered, oh yeah, it's down here in the den. And so I came out here, and I remember that this is where my wife had put it, like right here in this gap between the couch and the apothecary thing. It's just laying there down, like on the ground, just like you do with the plumeria at this time of year. And when I look at it, it looks deader than a doornail, y'all. It looks so dead. It looks like one of those pieces of driftwood that you'll find at the beach and set on fire for a campfire. And to add insult to injury here, there's a dang trash bag wrapped around it, symbolizing a body bag. And so again, I'm looking at this incredibly disappointed, and I'm thinking, what a terrible way to start off the experience. I was trying to talk to life. I was trying to get my experience kicked off through the prism of life and talk to Jesus and all this stuff, and this is what I see. And right about then is when I heard a voice. I can't tell you if this voice was my own voice in my head or external. I personally believe, a lot of people say that you're talking to your own subconscious. I think you're talking to both something external and your own subconscious. I think whatever is external that's talking to you has no choice but to communicate to you through your own brain. So I think it's both. But regardless, I heard a voice that said, sometimes something that seems dead can be very much alive. And that hit me hard. And when I say that, y'all, I'm talking when you're at the depths of hopelessness, specifically about life itself, and you're trying to fight for the life of your baby daughter, and you're trying to hope that you're going to get a heartbeat and all this other stuff. And everyone's telling you that the fetus or the embryo that's inside your wife's womb is practically dead. I can't tell you how hopeful it is to hear that sometimes something what did it say? I'm getting emotional. I'm trying to remember. It said I don't remember if he said seems or looks. It doesn't matter, y'all. The communication was sometimes something that looks dead can be very much alive. And I started bawling instantly. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard in my life. One of the most inspiring things I've ever heard in my life. I couldn't wait to tell my wife. But again, I knew that she was not so super thrilled about all this, and that's not an answer. I'm not done with my experience. I need to get more out of this. And so I went into the restroom here. I actually needed to go, number one, and I went into the restroom here. This was the same restroom that I had my trip number 5, the answer experience in. Where God told me that life was a joke and all this stuff. Same restroom, pretty amazing. This is where it all went down. But I came in here, I needed to use number 1. Fellas out there, when you're inebriated, here's a little life hack for you. When you're inebriated and you may miss the toilet, I hate to be too graphic here, it behooves you to sit down. Okay, check your man card and sit down, which is exactly what I did. I sat down and I turned the light off, actually. So it was actually, you actually see some light reflecting off of my screen here, but y'all, it was this dark in the dang room, that dark. But we're going to open up a door here to kind of let some light in. And so I'm in here, and y'all, to the right of me here might as well be the infinite void of intergalactic space, for crying out loud. And so, terrifying over here. But there's a lot of stuff that happened. I'll try to fast forward as much as I can through the stuff that didn't matter. I heard these jester-like kind of voices that came in, and they told me some beautiful things about life being incredibly sacred. And right when I got to the peak of the beauty of what they were telling me, they came over the top with, yeah, right, life is a plague, life is worthless, God hates life. Then it went into some like personal attack kind of stuff where he said, God creates life only to destroy it. And then he added insult to injury there by saying God created Julia only to kill her. So I wasn't having that. That wasn't very pleasant. And so I decided to ohm past these lower vibrational bottom-feeding nasties and I did my oming routine. Thank you, Sergio, for showing me how to do that and telling me how to do that. So oming is basically like a spiritual rocket ship. I rocketed past those critters, and I omed about 10, 12 times, and I landed at a place where everything seemed peaceful. I encountered some very peaceful kind of like quasi-entity kind of things. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, to the right of me, I heard a voice that very calmly said, "Look at me." And when I did that, when I looked over into the infinite blackness here, which is already terrifying, I saw something that I can't explain to you. There was definitely some kind of geometry there, but there's no way that I can explain it to you. But regardless, this voice said, "Look at me," and I looked at it, and it was cosmic horror, Lovecraftian kind of infinite terror kind of horror. And it said, "Do you like what you see?" And I said, "No, I don't." And it said, "Too bad. This is what you've made for yourself. You belong here, and you're going to stay here forever." And I was like, I don't like that at all. And so I started doing my Jesus Christ test to this thing. If you, this was just one of my techniques. It works with a lot of other people too, specifically Christians, obviously. But if you say Jesus Christ to something that you encounter, it will usually just gone. They're gone. If they mean you harm, they're out of there. But the ones that hang around, you can still probe a little further, and they will always make their intentions known when you ask the entity what its opinion of Jesus Christ is, right? You give them just enough rope to hang themselves with, and their answer is very telling, and they'll likely, again, show you their intention. So I said, what do you think about Jesus Christ? And this voice says, "I know him quite well, but he's not here right now. I am, and you're going to have to deal with me." And I really didn't like that answer. I was starting to get freaked out. The more I looked into the void, the more it was sucking me into this cosmic terror kind of thing. So I said, I don't like this at all. I'm out of here. I got up and I darted into this room right here, looking specifically for this. This was my refuge, my salvation, my lifeboat, everything I needed for help. And I grabbed this chair right here and I sat it down right here on the floor, right about there, and sat down right in front of it, looking to communicate to Jesus. It's like, help me, save me, right? But that thing, whatever the heck it was, pursued me, and it came in the room. And I don't know if it materialized through that wall or if it just kind of popped in here or what, but it came in, and y'all, it was huge. It was, it took up the entire room, like, and even like poked up above it and went down below. It's like, this thing was absolutely huge, and I got a much better look at it this time. And what I can tell you is that it was these overlapped triangles that were iridescent and translucent as well, and kind of had this rainbow shimmer to them, kind of like an oil slick or like the surface of a soap bubble kind of thing. And it was massive, absolutely massive. And I can't tell you what was in the center of it. It was very complicated, but with these overlapping triangles, almost looking like dragon scale kind of like thing, I could see how someone could interpret that as feathers. In fact, I could see how this would look very much like a biblically accurate seraphim, which you're seeing right now. Now, granted, I didn't see eyeballs to my recollection, but again, whatever was in the center of it was very complicated, and I can't tell you what that was. I know it wasn't a humanoid, though, like a cherubim, like what you're seeing now. I didn't see that. I didn't see a humanoid, because that thing has like a humanoid kind of face or something. I didn't see anything like that. It was just a very complicated looking, overlapping, dragon scale looking, trippy thing, a bunch of triangles looking like wings. And so it was quite beautiful, honestly, but intense, incredibly intense. And this incredible intensity was heightened by the fact that something this huge, okay, look at the size difference between this seraphim and that person, okay, something that huge that actually in reality looks like this is incredibly angry, right? And specifically angry at you, but then on top of that, yelling at you. Again, imagine something that looks like this, that is this big, yelling at you. And it was yelling stuff like, hey, look, you blew it. You squandered your opportunity here. You had this amazing opportunity where you were talking to God and Jesus and getting insights and trying to help others, and you blew it. And what it was referencing, what it was speaking about, was the fact that in an attempt to extend my hand to Jesus in a symbol of solidarity and, wanting to be on his team, I tried to abstain from my particular addiction. I tried to fast from that for a certain amount of time, and I failed. And this thing called me out on it, and rightfully so. But it was getting a little too overbearing, a little too violent. I mean, y'all, it was terrifying. And even though I felt I deserved a little bit of that, it got to the point where I was like, hey, look, I don't like this anymore. I'm out of here. I don't even know who you are. I remember saying that as I left. I said, I don't even know who you are. I want to talk to Jesus. And it said, I'll never forget this. It said, you know exactly who I am. You were the one who summoned me this morning. And y'all, just to kind of give you a tiny little backstory on that, for the past like 2 weeks or something up until that point, every morning I would wake up at 4 a.m. and pray to God. And the morning of the ultrasound, I read a message from my friend, and he said, hey, next time you pray, ask God to send you your guardian angel. I don't believe in guardian angels, but y'all, I'm desperate at this point. It's like anything will help, So I said, why not? I prayed to God, hey, let me talk to my guardian angel. So I'm like, holy crap, this thing is an angel. And so I ran into this room and shielded myself, literally. So I come in here to this room and I sit myself right here on this couch. And again, I'm shielding myself. I'm like doing this, thinking that this will help. I don't know why I thought that. But it again pursues me. It comes in here and it again takes over the entire room. I mean, it's huge, but it sets up shop right there. And it's perfectly in alignment. Like it's within the exact line of sight of this right here. And y'all, I don't know if you can see this quite well, okay, but this is an angel right here cradling the likes of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, okay? Someone who will play a very large role later. But again, within the direct line of sight of what I think is a dang seraphim, y'all, a biblically accurate seraphim, is this angel cradling Jesus. And it's all happening right here. And this thing is still yelling at me, y'all. It's still insulting me and telling me how much I blew it. And again, imagine something cosmically terrifying and cosmically huge right in your face, just like, I mean, Lovecrafty and freaking horror. It reminded me of, imagine being like tied to a pole and there's like a 155 pound freaking pit bull with a head that's twice the size of your head. You know how some of those pit bulls get those really giant, massive, muscular heads. Imagine a pit bull, huge one. You're tied to a pole, and this thing is right in your face, like barking and growling and snarling and drooling, and you know that you're about to get your freaking face and skull broken in half, and your brains. It's like terrifying stuff. But imagine that on a cosmic scale. So I'm freaked out. I'm freaking terrified. I'm shielding myself. And I'm like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I want to talk to Jesus. Please help me, Jesus. And then this thing says in response, he goes, you don't get to talk to Jesus, not after what you've done. Jesus doesn't talk to the likes of you. He sends in his dogs to do his dirty work, and I'm his dog. And y'all, you can see me goosebumping right now. It was freaking terrifying. But after getting enough of my ass kicked, I started kind of fighting back a little bit. Okay, I realized that he hadn't smote me yet, even though I thought I was going to be smitten or smote or whatever. He hadn't done it yet, and so I started to fight back a little bit. And I said, "Hey, look, buddy, I'm sorry to say this here, but I'm a human being, and I'm a human being that's plagued with addiction on top of that. What do you expect from me? I know I need to rise up and be better, but you are a cosmic being who is closer to the perfection and free will of God than I will be and ever can hope to be. I'm the one down here in the lowest vibration, in the muck and the grit, struggling and fighting. And I have a giant freaking monkey on my back in the form of addiction while I'm trying to fight this off." And I'll never forget, in the argument that I'm having with him, in the first of many overlapping synchronistic things that are going to come, in the experience. My wife is upstairs watching The Desperate Housewives, and some of the things that that we're arguing back and forth to each other, me and this angel, some of the actual words and phrases are being said at the exact same time by characters on that show that are themselves involved in an argument. Now, it wasn't like every word. It was like every other third like phrase or third thing, but still you would hear it and it's like, what in the hell? It was freaky. But just like if you had to give a loved one a dose of tough love, and then you realized you kicked their ass a little too hard and had to back a little bit, the angel kind of did that. It told me in so many words. It said, "Hey, look, nothing is set in stone yet. You haven't completely screwed this. You had to be shown a little bit of tough love there," but it said, a miracle can still happen. And he said a miracle will still happen if you obey. And it basically doubled down on this whole sometimes something that looks dead can be very much alive kind of idea. And right about that time, my alarm on my phone went off. It's now 1:58 p.m. I gave myself 2 minutes to me and my wife to have a discussion. Are we going to have this ultrasound or a DNC operation? So I told the angel, I'm like, hey, look, I got to go. He basically says, I understand. As I'm leaving, he says something to the effect of, trust the signs. We wouldn't have put these signs in your life if they didn't mean something. He said, trust those signs. It's going to happen. A miracle's going to happen. Just wait and see. God is God, right? And then it said, go upstairs and fight for your daughter and do the right thing. And I said, I will. So I turn around and I go up the stairs, and this thing, as I'm walking, y'all, is wrapping its wings around me. And I see the triangle, iridescent, translucent, dragon scale, cosmic triangles wrapping around me. And I'm freaking out because I'm walking up the stairs to my wife, who is not thrilled about this psychedelic stuff in the least because of these amazing signs and synchronicities that we both cried over that didn't pan out. She's now very angry with God and doesn't believe that any of this is real. But she still wanted me to get an answer, right, wrong, or indifferent, about what the heck happened. Like, she wants to hear some kind of logical, beautiful Shakespearean explanation as to what the heck happened. Maybe we can hold out hope that we'll get some good advice here. And so I'm coming up the stairs, understanding the sensitivity of my wife is not cool with this stuff. I need to pretend like I'm not freaking out. I need to pretend like I'm not being wrapped in the wings of an angel as I ascend the stairs. And so I walk up the stairs. My wife is sitting right there. I decide to sit down in this chair, and we decide, to have our little discussion. And the discussion that played out, y'all, was the most intense verbal argument fight that I've ever been in my entire life. My wife and I, we never fight. We fight like once a year, and we've been together for like 6 years now. We fight probably less than once a year. And when we do fight, the arguments are over very quickly and amicably. It's amazing what happens when you tell someone what you're thinking, what you're feeling, when you're thinking and feeling it. But regardless, we have this fight. And y'all, it's not a yelling fight. There may have been a little bit of raised voices, a little bit. It wasn't a yelling fight, but it was the most emotional fight that I've ever been a part of, and I ever hope to be a part of ever again. My wife and I are both crying our freaking eyeballs out, y'all. It's so intense. I can't tell you. Like, I don't want to relive it, honestly. I told her for the first time in my life, because I'm usually a person who likes to triangulate an argument and meet the person halfway and work and negotiate a settlement that's amicable. But I told her I absolutely cannot do that this time. That I am fighting for my daughter's life, and I have to stand my ground, and I'm absolutely not going to budge. I absolutely want to do a third ultrasound. And this begged the question for her. She said, well, what did you find out on this experience so far? And I told her the truth. I said, I didn't let her know that there was an angel literally right here, this close in my face. Y'all, it was this close to me. It was like right here, staring me down. Quite intimidating. I didn't dare let her know that yet. But I told her, I said, I was told that I need to trust the signs. And then she erupted into tears and she says, I don't believe any of that, do you? I don't believe any of this whatsoever. It's a big joke to me. And again, we're bawling our eyeballs out. And that's when I let the cat out of the bag. I said, baby, there is a literal angel sitting right here next to me. And I remember this made me cry even harder because it's so emotionally intense. Having an angel looking you in the face while you're fighting for your daughter's life. And I said, there is a literal angel sitting right here, right now, in my face, looking at me and telling me that I need to fight for my daughter and that a miracle will happen and that I need to trust the signs. And I told her that this thing echoed the very thing that was communicated to me at the beginning of the trip when I was looking at the dead plumeria down there on the ground that looks like a piece of driftwood that looks deader than a doornail. And I hear a voice that says, sometimes something that seems dead can be very much alive. And my wife burst into even more tears because she has a very deep connection to that plumeria. That plumeria was gifted to her by a friend of hers who passed away, and every single thing I've heard about this friend of hers from anyone that has known him says that he was the most amazing person that they've ever met in their entire life, so sweet and loving and forgiving and everything. It's a perfect symbol that Jesus Christ spoke to me through that plumeria as a symbol of life itself, and it's given by that man. My wife knew exactly what was going on, and she's crying her eyeballs out. And that gesture won the argument. We look down at our phones and we realize it's now like past 2 p.m. It's like 2:05. We're like 5 minutes past and we're freaking out. It's like, what do we tell the doctor? And being asked a question like, what do I tell the doctor? In that moment, when you're on psychedelics this deep, it turns into an existential tailspin, a life audit. I'm like, what do you mean, what do I tell the doctor? I wanted to get on the phone with the doctor and tell him my full story about my fall from grace, my addiction, my nihilism, and how I didn't think that life was worth anything, completely worthless. And on top of that, worse than worthless, a plague. And having found God and being brought back into grace and my literal life saved, and now I understand the sanctity and preciousness of life. It's like, what do you mean? What do I wanted to just point my entire podcast at him and blast every episode into his brain and say, what do you think my answer is? But alas, I can't give these existential deep dive answers. I have to bring this and wrestle this down back to reality and give a practical answer. And I'm sitting there, I couldn't speak. And I said, just tell him that we want a freaking ultrasound, a third ultrasound. And it was like, whew, it was over. And like my wife dropped her phone and I sat down like this and we both looked at each other for about a solid 5 minutes in disbelief. It was almost like if you've ever survived a car accident, it's like pulling over to the side of the road after a major, almost major life ending accident. You pull off to the side of the road and you're just like, what just happened? And that's exactly what this was like. And I'll never forget, enough time had passed, I had realized that I had essentially fought for my daughter and won, and this angel thing who was still here, I was picking up on this vibe of peace and love, and I did it. And I'm looking at my wife who had fought hard and diligently and again, fighting for a good cause. And I, once again, just realized how awesome of a person she was to acquiesce to this. And I told her for about 15 minutes straight an amazing Shakespearean soliloquy that I made up on the spot of how much I loved her, how much she's the most amazing person I've ever met in my entire life, and that there's a reason why I found God through her. And I'll never forget this, y'all. Right in that moment, she lays down on the couch and a beam of light comes through the window and shines on her. this beam of light shines down on her, and when it shines down on her, she looked like and sounds weird that I'm going to start crying about this, but you'll understand it. You'll understand it. She looked like an 85-year-old, maybe 90-year-old woman laying there. And I saw wrinkles, and I saw like little spots, and I saw this just white, grayish white hair, crinkly, and someone could look at that, an aged, withered woman, and say she's not beautiful. But what I saw was one of the most beautiful things in my entire life. She looked so beautiful. This radiant light falling down on her, and she was glowing, like literally glowing. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was so beautiful. Except she was an 85, 90-year-old woman, and I told her, I was like, "Oh my God, babe." I said, "Babe, I'm looking at you right now, and you look 90 years old." And she gave me this weird look. She's like, and I said, "No, babe, no. You look so beautiful. It's so amazing. Like, I'm seeing what you're going to look like when we're this old. You're going to be a grandmother. And you're not only beautiful, it's almost as if you're more beautiful." I can't explain it. My wife's a gorgeous woman, don't get me wrong, but there was something about this that was like she was more beautiful and more glorious. And I went on another long tangent about how much I love her. And I remember saying, like, I remember specifically saying, and this truly is true, how much I love this woman, y'all. I said, "You run my life," because she does. I said, "I found God because of you. You are the reason I'm a better person. So therefore you do run my life." And I told her, I said, "I will kiss the ass of any redneck a-hole that comes over here and makes fun of me and says that my wife wears the pants in the relationship. You know, Andrew, your wife wears the pants in the relationship and she rules your life." I told her, "I will get down, pull the pants down of said redneck, and kiss his bare ass and say, 'Yes, my beautiful, awesome, amazing wife does rule my life, sir. And I'm proud of that. And I will kiss the other cheek of you to prove to you how much I'm proud of that fact.'" I said, what I said in the moment was way more articulate and made more sense, but it was something about, I said something like, "I am happy to kiss both of that guy's ass cheeks and tell him, 'Yep, my wife rules my life. What do you want, buddy?'" And I looked at my wife and I said, she's over there just kind of stoic and stone-faced, and I said, "Aren't you going to react?" Something like that. And she's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "I just gave you one of the most amazing compliments of all time." And I was like, "You're not going to react to that amazing compliment?" And she says, "What, that I look 85 years old?" It was one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my entire life, y'all. Absolutely hilarious. I started cracking up. Out of all that stuff, all that amazing, beautiful stuff I said about her, she says that. It's like, what, that I look 85 years old? And I start cracking up, and I'm laughing harder and harder and harder. And I look over at her, and I realize that I'd overplayed my hand. I forgot that we just did a life and death decision, and we likely aren't going to, likely the fetus isn't going to make it, and it's dead. Like the embryo, the fetus, whatever you want to call it, is dead. And I realize I'm joking and I'm laughing way too much in the moment. And I look over at my wife, and she is now very sad again. It's disturbing, the amount of laughter coming from me. She may have chuckled a little bit, but it was like, hey, it's a little too much. And I remember saying to her, I said, I thought to myself, "Oh, Andrew, you just turned into a jackass at the wrong time to turn into a jackass." And I said, hey, look, I'm sorry. I was like, baby, I'm really sorry. Should I leave now? Like I think I should leave, right? Should I just leave this room? And she kind of nodded her head yes as she's crying. And so I got up. As I'm passing by these windows, though, I noticed that there were raindrops on the windows, even though it was not raining. Like, it was clearly not raining, right? And we're on the second floor here. It's not like there's a sprinkler system down there that somehow sprayed the windows. And plus, the raindrops looked different than regular raindrops. I don't know. They looked bigger, maybe a little more viscous, but there was not clouds in the sky. It wasn't like this dark, ominous feeling, like a rainstorm, like a thunderstorm would be, or anything like that. And again, the raindrops looked very different, very perplexing to me. I was like, that's interesting. But, you know, with her crying there, because that's what happened as I was leaving, she starts crying. I thought that maybe this was like a kind of a manifestation of that, of her crying, and the windows were crying as well. And so I came in here, and first of all, right off the bat, very first thing I noticed was the window in here. Same thing, those tears that I mentioned before, those viscous, like raindrop looking, really thick tears. Very first thing I noticed, all the windows were doing that. But then, as I looked back at this mirror here, it was even more detailed, because not only was I closer, but I could just see more of it. And what it reminded me of is the center of the droplets, all right, was, you know, of course, like a line, right? But surrounding that was almost like this Rorschach test ink blot pattern. And so you had these streaks, and they had that Rorschach ink blot kind of thing going on. It almost looked like the Shroud of Turin, or however you say it, the shroud that Jesus was buried in. It has those burn marks where it was folded or whatever, and that formed like a symmetrical pattern. It really looked like that. And so that was happening here. It was happening there. The windows were crying. And then when I sat down, you know, I'm in full amazement. When I sat down, even this was doing it. It was quite trippy. And so, you know, I'm taken by what's going on and all this, you know, crying, and I start crying myself. And so I'm here with everything going on. I started crying, and I was crying for probably a good like 5 minutes or so before I needed to use the restroom again. So I got up and I went in here, and again in here, same thing with the tears, like right here, those ink blot Rorschach Shroud of Turin tears. It sounds crazy, but it seriously looked like that. Rain, you know, tears happening here, happening there. The shower, any reflective surface had it. So I'm just like, wow, right? I go into the restroom, I do my thing, I come out. When I come out, everything is now crying, not just the reflective surfaces. I'm talking the walls are crying, and it was really creepy, y'all, seeing the walls cry. This door right here was gushing. It was like almost spurting out tears, and they were like just flowing and streaming. And I was trying to get a really good look at what was going on there with the door, and I came around and kind of peered at it from like this angle. And when I got right here, I noticed this double reflection here, where you can see the mirror back there in the background. And there was something about me being right here, the triangulation of everything. I saw the face of Jesus Christ and a cross there. So if you're familiar with these Facebook memes where it's like, hey, squint your eyes and you see a human face, it's like that they'll have a picture of like some dudes at a farmer's market, like picking oranges out of a basket or something, and then if you hold the picture out far enough and squint your eyes, you see the face of Jesus. Or, you know, it's not just Jesus. There's one where it's George Costanza, and then there's another one where it's Adolf Hitler. But usually it's Jesus. Like here's another example of a really interesting Jesus one with two girls, I think 3 girls even, with cups of coffee and whatnot. And so that's what it was like. So right here, it you know, Jesus, his face appeared through the room, and you're not going to see it now because it's just a cosmic psychedelic thing. You like, don't even try to look at it right now. You won't see it. But I definitely saw it in the moment, and it's very similar to what happened a lot of times on my experiences, but particularly trip 7, the conquering, where I said that God took shape from the room, like the room became God. That happened right here. That was right here. And just imagine, very similar to that Facebook like meme kind of thing of looking at a picture of this right here and holding it out at a distance and squinting your eyes a little bit and seeing God. The only difference, of course, is that in that experience, God, or the room rather, which was God, imagine the room grabbing both sides of your face with 2 hands and holding your face and cradling you and saying, I will save you as he lets you go and drops you into hell. Very amazing experience. The link for that episode is right here if you haven't heard it. By the way, there's a beautiful thing that happens. There's a reason I had to go through that, and it's a beautiful thing. But anyways, that was amazing, absolutely amazing. I'm sitting here trying to get a connection with this face of Jesus that I see, and it's only there for maybe about 10 seconds before it kind of fades out. And I sit here for about another 10 seconds trying to see where it went. I'm looking all around, I can't find it. And so finally I'm like, again, it's exhausting when you're deep in psychedelics to even stand and walk. So I was like, I'm going to go sit back down. So I came in here and I sat back down. And so I'm sitting here and it's as if the whole room is closing in on me and like I'm being drowned by these tears that are everywhere. And it's really intense. And I had this feeling in the moment of, usually psychedelic users will talk about this interconnectedness with everything in the universe, and I felt this interconnectedness with everything in the universe, and everything was crying. All of existence, the entire universe, all of creation was crying, and crying through the person of Jesus Christ. Again, having seen his face and the cross in there, it was this deep connection there with everything and me, and so I'm now crying as well because of this intensity. And about that time, I detect and see a person enter the room, and it was in the corner of my eye. And it's one of those things where if you look directly at it, you don't see it. Anyone who's seen it, like a ghost or something like that, understands this phenomenon. It's like you see things, you see a human in the corner of your eye and you look and it's not there. But what I did see when I looked directly at it is this kind of like smoky kind of fractal smoke enter the room. But along with this was this proprioception of, you can tell when there's another person in the room with you, even if you can't see them sometimes. And so I felt this presence. And this presence, y'all, it's the best way I can describe it. Anyone who's had a Jesus encounter understands how earnest and sincere he is and how intense he is with that earnestness and sincerity. It's the highest level of earnestness and sincerity you could possibly imagine. And I'm going to stop short of saying stern, but there definitely isn't. There's definitely this. There's no time for tomfoolery, for joking around, for there's a job to do, and we need to be serious here. The stakes couldn't be higher, okay, kind of thing. But at the same time, with this intense earnestness and sincerity and intensity overall, there's an infinite well of tenderness and love there at the same time. It's the most unique presence I've ever encountered. Unbelievable. But as it approached me, I'm crying, of course, and it says, "Andrew, why do you worry so?" And because I know you can't hide anything from God, and because I know he wants 100% honesty, I said, I worry because I'm a human being. There's a lot of intense things going on in my life right now, the most intense I've ever had. And if there ever was a time to worry for me right now, it's right now, and I added something to the effect of, you have to understand this. I just saw and understood and had a mind melding with you that you cried all the time, which means that you are very much a human being. And so I flipped it around on him. I said, you ask me why I worry. I ask you, why did you cry all the time? And I'll never forget this. This is one of the most heartbreakingly beautiful things I've ever heard in my life. But before I get into exactly what he said, let me first explain and actually play the raw audio of an experience I had with God. I don't do an episode for every one of my experiences, but I do record most of them. I had this encounter with God, and we were talking about suffering in general, and how and why people inflict suffering on each other. And this is what God told me.
It's almost as if God's saying, I don't blame you for getting what you thought you needed. He said blame. He's basically saying blame is no part of this. Just flush it out of your head. People do things to people, and it's because we're stuck here. And God is calling to every single one of us, and some of us don't listen, or we're not paying enough attention. And we may never understand why it has to be like this. But God is basically telling me he gets it. Of course he does. You created this. I feel your pain. It's like he says he feels my pain because he's felt it himself through us. He's felt it himself through us. And so when we hurt people, we're hurting him. And we're hurting ourselves too. That's the most heartbreaking thing I've ever heard. He says, I know. He said, don't worry, I've done something about it. Don't cry for me, he says.
And so, in keeping with that message, he said to me, I cried for the pain that I felt in the world. Incredibly heartbreaking, because I knew that he felt our pain through us. Not only did he see people have terrible things happen to them, but because he is literal life itself, he feels the pain that person feels when they feel it. And so it was a very intensely, heartbreakingly beautiful thing to hear. And right at the depths of understanding that, he turned it around though, and he told me that there was another reason that he cried, and this, y'all, was just, it's one of those things that just again perfectly reflects his personality. He said, sure, he cried for the pain that he felt in the world, but he cried equally for the beauty that he felt and saw in the world as well. And that is so amazing, because from the beginning of my psychedelic endeavors and stuff like that and finding God, it was always clear to me the message of we share in the divine spark. Like I always liken it to a river system, right? We are the streams and tributaries and estuaries that give rise to the river, and then the river gives rise to the ocean, and the ocean is God. It's like all of that water is still God, right? Now, granted, an estuary and a stream couldn't say that it is Challenger Deep, right, which is the most extreme place in the ocean that you can possibly imagine. But water is water, and so there's like a cherry tree. A cherry can't say that it is a cherry tree, but a cherry gives rise to a cherry tree. It's you can go, on and on with these self-referencing loops here. And so when he said that he cried equally for the beauty that he saw in the world, it was very apparent to me that he saw these godly acts of love and sacrifice and all the good stuff. And he, just like someone, I don't know, being moved by the most beautiful sunset they've ever seen in their life, or hearing the most beautiful song that they've ever heard, he cried at the beauty. It was an absolutely amazing juxtaposition, dichotomy, yin-yang of crying. And what's so amazing, y'all, about crying is the innocence of it. It's one of the most beautiful gifts that God has ever given us, in that when you really think about it, we share that same act, okay, with infants, for crying out loud. No pun intended. The innocence there is so amazing that even as an adult, you submit to crying. And it's such a beautiful, powerful thing. It's one of the most powerful things in existence. And trust me when I say that we're going to get deep into the concept of crying in the unpacking episode. There is a lot more there that is unbelievable. And the understanding of crying and why we do it and how it's effective in communication and understanding and all this other stuff. Paints just the perfect picture of who Jesus Christ was, based on what we know through Scripture or know through our own personal experiences. Really, really amazing stuff, y'all. And so after absorbing that and crying with Jesus, y'all, I cannot describe to you how amazing that is, to cry with Jesus. After that, wiping tears away and almost choking on my own mucus, I asked Jesus about this whole guardian angel thing. I said, hey, was that really my guardian angel? I prayed for it. It showed up. It was really intense. And, was that your work or not? And I'll never forget this, y'all. This is freaking crazy. This is one of the craziest things that's ever happened on any of my experiences is right when I asked that question about my guardian angel. My wife, who's listening or watching the show Desperate Housewives in the background in the room next to me here, someone on that show says the name Gabriel. Y'all, right when I'm asking about what's the deal with this guardian angel, I hear the name Gabriel. Okay, for you Muslims out there, Jibril. Okay, this is a big deal. This is a big. I call for my guardian angel, and the archangel Gabriel shows up. Now, granted, y'all, I did some research on that show, and I couldn't find a character named Gabriel. But maybe it was some peripheral character, like some kind of I don't know, extra or something like that. I don't know, but there is a main character in the show played by Ava Longoria, and her name is Gabrielle. And that's probably what I really heard. But regardless, y'all, I ask, what's the deal with this angel? And I hear Gabriel or Gabrielle. It's like, what? Like, wow. Right? Now, granted, Jesus didn't say that. In fact, Jesus didn't really answer my question at all. It was the TV that did in the room next door. And so I didn't get so much of a clarifying answer to that, but I was still like taken aback and like, holy moly, I cannot believe that the archangel Gabriel showed up and basically smote me downstairs before comforting me. But intense stuff. And I remember telling Jesus, I said, hey, he was saying something about obedience. How do I obey you? Right? This whole give you my hand. Like, what is that? Like, how do I obey you? And I'll never forget, right when I asked that question, there was a shadow that formed right here in the door. And it was a perfect like shadow of me. Like I could see my outline sitting right there, right? But it was like a spiritual version of me for some reason. It's hard to explain how I knew that. But this door was a barrier. On the other side was something spiritual, and there was a shadowy kind of figure of myself there. And this shadowy figure was sitting exactly how I was sitting. But once I understood it was me, it got down on all fours or whatever in the prostrate. Is that how they call it? Position. How Muslims do when they do their call to prayer. And I heard Jesus tell me, in order for me to understand how to obey, I need to understand what obedience means to him. And what he told me is something absolutely unbelievable. He says, so beautiful. He says, obedience works like this. He goes, he's like, you're obedient to me and I'm obedient to you. It's a two-way street. It's a reciprocal. But he said within that, in this mind meld, it was very apparent to me that how he repays how obedience, how he is obedient to you is 10, 100, 1,000, a million, a billion, a quadrillion times more obedience. The give back that he gives is so much more than you can possibly imagine for us. And that was an absolutely beautiful message. But then I told him, I said, okay, but now how do I obey you? You showed me what obedience means to you, but how do I obey you? And I'll never forget this. Right as he begins to answer this question, he starts to take form. And what I mean by that is, he was this smoky kind of vapor, proprioceptive kind of feeling someone's presence kind of thing. But when I asked him that question, he began to take form. And as he did, it everything kind of precipitated and coalesced into this smoke that became more human. Like, it was this smoky vapor before, but it was kind of formless. Now it started turning into this kind of as if you were shining a projection of somebody through smoke. You could see a person well enough in there. It's still a little bit distorted because smoke moves and swirls and stuff like that, but you saw the ghostly image of a person, and it was undeniably Jesus. It had the crown of thorns and the kind of tunic or whatever and all that stuff. And so when I asked it, how do I obey you? He kind of smoked up in his presence and started to kind of come into the doorway here. And he says, you do exactly what I did. And he goes, I'll never forget this, with his hand as he's getting crucified in the doorway, he says, you forgive everyone. With his left hand, he said, forgive everyone, across the x-axis here. And then he said, and listen, across the y-axis, as he falls back into a crucified position. I just want to say that again. I asked Jesus Christ, how do I obey you? He says, you do exactly what I did. You forgive everyone and listen. And then he took form in the crucified manner right here in my doorway, again, looking as if it was somebody projecting an image of Christ through smoke. And what was amazing about this, that message blew me away. And I remember he assumed the crucified pose here. In typical fashion, he has his head down like this. And I wanted to look into his eyes. And so what I did is, being down where I was right here, I kind of like went like this to try to look into his eyes. And what happened was there was this almost like a prism. There was like a refraction where when you got at the right angle, there was a different version of him. There was a larger version, like a disembodied zoom in of his face that popped out, to where there was two of him. There was the Jesus that was crucified up here, and then when you looked at the right angle, there was a larger version of his face that was staring right at you. And again, in that stare, y'all, the 1,000-yard stare of Jesus is something that can only be described as a personified version, in the flesh version, of that presence that I mentioned earlier, that infinite earnestness and sincerity and urgency, no clowning around kind of thing. We don't have time for this. This is the stakes couldn't be higher. This is the most serious thing you can possibly imagine, while at the same time having this infinite well of love and forgiveness and all that stuff. It was unbelievable is what it was. But more unbelievable than just his presence there. And again, y'all, the crown of thorns and everything, I see it. It's all there. It's a sepia tone kind of smoky, ghostly projection through smoke version of that. Okay, unbelievable, like just out of this world. And then that disembodied head looking directly at you. You cannot describe it. And so I'm blown away by that, but I'm also mostly blown away, or more blown away, by what he said. Forgive everyone and listen is such a perfect description of what he did in life, in his human life. And if he's calling, me to do that, it makes perfect sense of be like how I was, to obey me. And I was blown away by the beauty of that. And I started crying, and I stood up and I said, can I kiss your feet, sir? And I started kissing the cross. And when I looked back up at him, though, I'll never forget that look was a lot more serious. And there's no way I'm going to be able to replicate it, y'all. But it went from something like this to something like this. And it wasn't a mean look. It's just a lot more serious. And there was this terrifying moment in a sense that I understood the intensity and severity of what it means to forgive everyone and what it means to listen, right? Jesus kind of in this mind meld let me know that it's so serious to him that his hands are permanently nailed into an embrace of forgiveness. That's how serious he is about this. And his feet are permanently nailed to where he can't run away from anyone if someone comes and starts offloading their baggage, right? He's going to listen to you no matter what. You want me to prove it? Right? And all of a sudden, the violence, the understanding of that violence there, of like having nails driven through your hands and feet, was a symbol of how intense, not even a symbol, it's a direct reflection of how intense this act of forgiving everyone and listening can get. And this guy paid the ultimate price for forgiving everyone and listening. And when I start thinking about that, I start thinking about stuff I've already learned on previous experiences, like trip number 10, Beyond Infinity, where I talk about, if you had a family member who died in 9/11, it's like, if you came across Osama bin Laden, it's our duty to not only forgive that person, forgive Osama bin Laden, but embrace him and then wash his feet and then, I don't know, anoint his hair with scented oil and stuff like that. And, look at him and say, I love you like a brother, and et cetera, et cetera. And you have to mean all of this too. So forgiving is already incredibly, insanely, you cannot possibly imagine how freaking insanely hard it is, especially think about that. Losing someone, if you lost your whole family in 9/11 and you ran across Osama bin Laden, providing he was still alive, would you be able to do that? Pretty dang hard, right? But I'll never forget, right after understanding how hard that is, and it's something that I've already understood before, but understanding this in the moment with Jesus looking you in the face is a completely different story. And at the peak of that understanding, then I started to understand this whole listen part. And this is where things got even more intense. Of forgiving someone is one thing. Let's imagine that you forgave Osama bin Laden and washed his feet and anointed his hair with oil and whatever, fanned him with a palm leaf or something and saying, I love you like a brother. Now you have to sit down and listen to his story. You have to listen to why. And here's the thing, y'all. Here's how everything turns around and hits you like a ton of bricks. You listen with so much intent. You're so invested in his story. You're so invested in him. You cry at his story. This is how impossible of a feat this is, y'all. It absolutely blew, and I knew and I knew instantly the intensity and severity of that. Not only from my side of the equation, right? It's like trying to listen to your worst enemy's justification for killing your whole family, and understanding this justification so deeply that you cry with your enemy. Y'all, wow is all I can say. But then it became even more serious when I realized that sometimes even just asking someone to offload their baggage to you there can be so much hurt and so much pain there that they are going to take it out on you, the person who asked, even regardless of how you could be their best friend, and you bring up a topic that is so sensitive that they want you to feel that pain too, and next thing you know, you're either mentally or physically injured, or like Jesus here, killed. Okay, this became insanely, incredibly serious. It wasn't this hippy dippy, lovey dovey, hold hands while frolicking through a meadow singing Kumbaya anymore. This was the most intense thing you could ever possibly imagine to do in life. And this guy did the ultimate form of that, okay, and was tortured and killed for it. And so it was extremely powerful, especially factoring in at this point a third Jesus appeared that was right about here, and he was holding down what I can only tell you is a cosmic being, and it's a cosmic being that I've encountered a few times on my experiences, and associated with this cosmic being is always this hyper cosmic sense of doom, of the worst kind of doom, of the worst evil that you can possibly imagine, intent on ripping the whole universe apart and everyone's lives within it. It's like try to kill and maim as much as possible and destroy people's lives in the process. And on a universal, cosmic, beyond universal, multiversal, and beyond scale, like you cannot even imagine how intense this thing that Jesus is holding down, and how angry and bitter and vile, and how much it wants to kill everything, and everything that I just said. Can't imagine. And when Jesus is there, of course, being in proximity to this nasty thing, as is typical, my face starts rotting off. I can literally probe around with my tongue in my mouth and feel that there's chunks of my mouth and teeth are missing, and I'm swallowing them, and there's blood. I could literally take my hand like this and rub it and see gore all over my hands, y'all. You go to touch your nose, and there's just a tiny little piece of cartilage there. You don't feel your nose anymore. It's been rotten off. Really disgusting stuff. And then, of course, it was throwing vomit at me and diarrhea, something, either or both. It was this brownish yellow fluid that you could literally feel and wipe off. You couldn't smell it, thankfully, but it was nasty. It was the worst kind of nasty you can possibly imagine. And wrapped up within this listen concept, again, Jesus is holding this thing down, but he's looking at me while he's holding it down. And the intensity of his eyes when he's looking at me while he's holding this thing down, it said it all. It basically said, be prepared to face this thing whenever you listen, right? And when I had that understanding, I started getting pulled down that cosmic nightmare of, y'all, you cannot even imagine just kind of barely peeling the onion, the first layer of the onion back on what that thing is, y'all. Whoo, buddy. Is all I can tell you. You can see me goosebumping right now. Like it's not a freaking joke, y'all. There's a reason why Jesus is so serious. I felt like I was going to die in that exchange and be ripped into cosmic hell. And while it's just incredibly intense. Okay, so I finally pulled out of that and kind of understood the gravity of the situation. And I'll never forget, as I'm sitting back down, I remember him saying, Andrew, people have misunderstood both forgiveness and hell. And this kind of piqued my interest, and I was like, what do you mean? And he said, and before I get into this, let me just briefly mention Dante's Inferno, right? There's that concept of there being levels of hell. Like you have, I think it was the people that have never been baptized at the top level. Then you have like adulterers, and then you go down to like rapists and murderers, and then at the very end of hell, at the very bottom is like the betrayers, right? And you got Satan's down there like chewing on Brutus, if I remember correctly, or something. And that's all kind of ridiculous per se, but I don't think that the concept isn't too far off, in my opinion. If you believe in something like hell, it's not too hard to imagine such levels, right, of stuff. And so Jesus said, there are no levels of hell, only levels of forgiveness. I'm going to say that again. I'm going to say it a little slower. Jesus said, there are no levels of hell, only levels of forgiveness. And that's all he said. But in the mind meld with him, what I got and gleaned from that is that human beings, okay, y'all, we tend to categorize and put restrictions therein on forgiveness itself. We flag people, right? In other words, what I mean by that is like, hey, I forgive you, but you're never allowed to talk to me ever again. You're never allowed to be around my family ever again. I forgive you, but I'm never inviting you to one of our softball games ever again. You can go down the list of categorized, flagged forgiveness that people put people in. And it became very clear to me that human beings have essentially built this hierarchy of, at the very bottom, there is absolutely not even a chance of forgiveness, so much so that the question doesn't even enter one's mind. It's like absolutely not even a question of forgiveness at the bottommost layer. Then the next level up is like, I'll consider forgiving you, but you're still not forgiven. And then so the question has entered my mind, but no. Then there's the next level above that, which is like, I forgive you, but if I ever see you again, I'm going to kill you, kind of thing. And then it's like, then we keep going up, and then eventually it gets to like, I forgive you, but I get to slap you in the face next time I see you, or something. Or I forgive you, but you're sitting out of the next fantasy football league meeting or something. I don't play fantasy football, but so you get the idea, right? Jesus conveyed to me, this is what he said next. I, through the mind meld, got that messagery, right? But the next thing he said to me is that he and God are at the highest level of forgiveness, where there is unconditional, uncategorical, unshakable, unflappable, everything. The highest form of forgiveness you can possibly imagine. It's like, not only are you fully forgiven, but everyone is fully forgiven, and you can wheel out all of the, like, again, unconditional, y'all, unconditional. And this played in perfectly and perfectly dovetailed into this whole concept of forgive everyone and listen, because the message was clear. If you're going to forgive someone, do not categorically forgive them. It's all or nothing. There is no halfway. There is no half anything on this, or even a quarter or a third, or even 75% or a 99.999999999%. It's nope. It's 100% all or nothing, the highest level of forgiveness that you can do, period. That's the standard that he set, and that's the standard that he's calling at least me, because he told me, how do I obey him? Forgive everyone and listen. And when you forgive everyone, forgive to the highest degree imaginable, uncategorically. So it's all or nothing. You don't. It's all or nothing. And about then is when we had this shift, this tonal kind of change, where Jesus is standing right there in the doorway, crucified. He now became. It became less intense in a way, and it became more of this. He's always accepting, y'all, but it really became this incredible, like, just, whew, I can't even tell you how accepting the presence was, and it embodied itself, this feeling of presence, as him being the flight attendant's person who checks you in to your flight as you go through the jetway onto a flight, and onto a plane that takes you essentially to heaven, right? And along with this idea, he says human beings, and this is a very interesting concept, he goes, human beings never travel when they go somewhere. How can you call it traveling when you take possessions with you? He was like, we don't really travel. We don't leave who we are, what we are. We take these things that we think is us, and we take it with us. This kind of traveling, going to heaven, essentially, is the only kind of traveling that you'll have where you leave all of your baggage. And that's what this became. This is really weird what I'm about to explain. But
it's not as if he was wearing a flight attendant uniform, y'all. But this right here became, and there was a bag on it. There was like a piece of luggage, like a duffel bag that me and my wife had gotten back from a weekend trip or something when one of our duffel bags was still sitting here. And so this became almost like the baggage check area where you come and you check your baggage. Jesus says, "Hey, welcome aboard," and you get on the jetway and you go to heaven. And there was all this amazing angelic heavenly landscape behind him here. If you go look at the Pillars of Creation picture, it was stuff like that, but in a heavenly, beautiful way. A lot of amazing stuff back there. And he was again the guy who checks you in, and then the beautiful symbolism that you check your baggage at the gate, and the message that it's the only form of travel where you want to leave all your baggage. It was this unbelievably freeing thing. And once again, Jesus is the perfect person for this, because forgive everyone and listen. It's like, hey, I forgive you. Now tell me your grievances and your struggles, and let's cry it out together. And in so doing, you're leaving your baggage and you're getting on and going. But then there was this really critical, unbelievable message coupled with this. And it was this concept of summit fever. Okay. I'm very fascinated with mountaineering. I've never mountaineered myself, but I watch a lot of documentaries about mountaineering. I'm very fascinated by Mount Everest and stuff like that. And what a lot of people who climb Mount Everest, there's this talk about summit fever is what they call it. And it's when you're so enthusiastic and so pumped up and so excited to climb all the way to the summit of Mount Everest. I mean, after all, you've spent tens upon tens of thousands, sometimes $100,000 or more to hike or to climb the mountain. Maybe it's your second or third or even fourth time, and you didn't hit the summit before, and now either way, there's all these different parameters and factors to where when you step foot on that mountain, because it's so hard, because you've paid so much money, because it might be your third or fourth time, it's like you are dead set and intent on climbing to the summit. Jesus showed me in this vision of this ethereal, heavenly gate check kind of thing. He showed me, it's like, hey, this is welcome. Anybody is welcome to this. It's like you're going to come and you're going to offload your baggage and you're going to get in the jetway and you're going to go to heaven. And no one, how do I put this? It's like it's perfectly okay. It's exactly what Jesus and God wants for us. But he said the real helpers, y'all, the ones, the real humanitarians out there, the ones willing to do the real, really intense, good, godly work, are the people that can go to this, gate check thing, offload their baggage, be forgiven by Jesus, and start to walk down the jetway, but then realize that there are people rummaging through their luggage that are still back here. The baggage handlers and stuff back here in this existence that you just left still need help. They're still tied to these possessions, and again, this analogy of them rummaging through your luggage. What Jesus showed me is that we shouldn't have summit fever. Okay? Just because heaven is so enticing and we've put in so much work to get there, we can still turn around and help people, y'all. And that's exactly what happens on these Mount Everest excursions. Is a lot of these people who die, most of them, pretty much all of them actually, die of what's called hypoxia, lack of oxygen. And you become so lethargic that you can't even walk 20 feet to save your own life, y'all. They found people frozen solid, only like 100, maybe like 50 yards, 30 yards, I forget how many yards, but an easily walkable distance, like 20, 30 yards from their own campsite, because they are so lethargic they can't muster any strength to move. And people will literally, as they're watching people die of hypoxia, they'll walk around them because they have summit fever and they want to summit Everest, and people die. I feel like that saving someone's life for me would be more awesome than summiting Everest. I don't care how much money I spent. If I saw someone dying, I would stop everything and dedicate the rest of my trip to making sure that person got down safely. But that's me. Jesus tells me we should not have summit fever. We need those of us who take the calling. We have the option to turn right back around, having stuck our nose into heaven and sniffed around. We have the option to turn around and help those in need. It was absolutely one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard in my life, and it really calls into question, there's some religions out there who are very macho, and they do all this macho stuff so they can get to heaven and paradise. And I just want to kind of point out what machismo really is, what my definition and what Jesus's definition of machismo is you're given the option to go cash everything in and roll around in your mansion, right? Or like a man, you turn around and help others. I'll tell you what the manliest man that I've ever heard of, conceived of, or possibly imagined would do. I'll tell you what I hope to do in the right moment. It's that. Turn right back around and help others. Really unbelievably beautiful kind of thing, y'all. And so, right about this time, one of these absolutely jaw-dropping, amazing, overlapping, synchronistic things that happens usually when my wife is in the room next to me playing a TV show, which happens on just about every trip because she's my sitter on just about every trip. And to pass the time, she's usually watching TV at a low volume, but it's usually not low enough to where I can still hear people talking, dialogue, or like loud noises like gunshots or explosions or music or laughter or applause. And like clockwork, every time something like that happens and sound leaks into this room, something will happen in the experience that perfectly coincides synchronistically or symbolically or metaphorically with what happened in that show. And some, these instances are sprinkled throughout this particular experience, ranging from minor to absolutely amazing major instances. One of the bigger ones, two of the bigger ones happened. One particular one was Jesus was talking to me. He said my name is what he said. I don't remember what he was talking about. This is one of the ones that I didn't record. I only started recording with my voice memo about 80% into the trip, so I missed a lot of these. But there was one in particular, I don't remember what Jesus was saying, but he said my name. He said Andrew, and in the room over, I heard the word Andrew, the name Andrew, and I was like, what in the world?
So when her son Andrew decided to stop drinking, Bree was pleased to see him follow those steps as successfully as she had.
And I don't know for the life of me why you would want to leave a room where the Messiah is talking to you. But for whatever reason, I guess I just wanted to follow my intuition and see if there was a massive sign about to be unfolded to me. I left the room and I went in there to see what was being played on the show, and this is what I saw.
Now I have to make the amends. And there's one person I've been really awful to.
Well, I know it seems difficult, but give it a chance. Some people are more forgiving than we give them credit for.
And so in one little clip, we have an addict named Andrew who is seeking forgiveness, and his mother sits down and basically challenges him saying, hey, look, you don't know how much forgiveness I'm capable of. Go ahead and try me, right? Which hints at this whole infinite plane of forgiveness, this unconditional, uncategorical level of forgiveness that Jesus wants us all to aspire to. This is playing out in that scene.
absolutely amazing to me. And then on top of that, what does she do? She sits down and listens to him, like she's prepping herself to listen. And so this covers the listen part too. Forgive everyone and listen. It's happening right there in that scene. Absolutely unbelievable. But that's not all that happened. That's not the only synchronistic thing in that scene. This also happened.
30 days sober. I am so proud of you.
I feel great, Mom.
And it gets better all the time. Just keep going to meetings and working those steps.
And y'all, I basically promised Jesus 30 days of sobriety, right? If you remember from that one episode where I was trying to figure out how one extends one's hand to Jesus in a gesture of, I want to be on your team, sir. And Jesus told me, if you give me 30 days, I will give you eternity. And so in that moment, I pledged that I would abstain from my particular addiction for 30 days. And then within that scene of addiction and Andrew and forgiveness and listening, I get a 30-day emblem, little button or whatever the heck that thing was, 30-day sobriety. It was absolutely amazing. I couldn't believe my eyes or ears. But then there was another one, like right after that symbolic vision of the jetway to heaven and the baggage check and all that stuff. Jesus basically communicates to me that we all belong there. We all are invited on this journey, every single one of us. And right at the heels of him saying that, I hear in my left ear here from the room next to me, Desperate Housewives, I hear someone yell something like, rise up. If we all do it together, we can't be denied, or something like that. Like storm the gates. Conquers all of that, and we bring all of that kicking and screaming, check your baggage, we forgive you too, all the way up to the highest level of forgiveness and love. In the background over there's like, rise up, people, if we do it together. Like they literally played this in the room next to me. And I was like, holy moly, he just got done telling me, y'all, that we all belong here, every single one of us. And then I heard that. And again, it's one of these moments where I know I have the Messiah right in front of me, but I need to follow this sign. And so I ran into the next room, and this is what I saw.
Are we still having a problem?
Yes, we still are. Doesn't it piss you all off that we're stuck in our gilded cage, forbidden to go to interesting seminars just because we're plus ones?
No, this is fun. I really feel like I'm in Japan.
This is the United States of America in the 21st century, not some oppressive patriarchal regime. It may be small and red, but this lanyard is no better than a burqa.
Oh dear.
We need to storm the gates and demand to be let inside.
If you're not going to use the rest of your flowers, can I?
Come on, rise up. If we do it together, we will not be denied.
4 o'clock, people. I think you've all earned a cocktail.
No, do not drink those. Those are the cocktails of oppression made from equal parts tyranny and blind obedience and... Oh, screw it.
Now, I know that doesn't overlap entirely with the biblical Jesus, right? Specifically that last part where she takes the wine and says, oh, screw it, and drinks it herself. Like, Jesus didn't sin. Like, that kind of symbolized that he recognized that we sinned and he decided, oh, whatever, I'm going to sin too. That's not what I interpret from that, y'all. What I interpret is that he understood our plight and that he felt our pain. Just the exact same things that he communicated to me earlier. But specifically the part where she's saying, hey, basically what's happening in that scene, y'all, is she's at a business conference with her husband, and she's a +1, and the +1s go to this like silly little arts and crafts things while their husbands go to the awesome business meetings, and she wanted to be in the awesome business meeting. To her, that is heaven, right? In this analogy. And so she is trying to show everyone that they don't have to be like the underlings here and like the dregs that are just, oh, go off in the corner and do your arts and crafts. It's like, we all belong there. And so her saying, rise up, if we rise up, we won't be denied, and, storm the gates and everything. It gives me goosebumps, y'all. I mean, again, I'm goosebumping right now. It's not focusing. To me,
it's amazing that overlap of that happening exactly in that moment, to me, is absolutely freaking amazing. And it's once again an example. I don't know how many times this has happened, y'all. If you remember that one episode, The Intervention, where there was the wedding dress of my wife, which is right here, and overlapping with that synchronistically, my wife was watching Army Wives, which again, it's always about wives, isn't it? The Desperate Housewives and Army Wives. But this guy is basically giving a wedding speech almost, it sounded like. And it was, and there were so many examples of that overlapping in that one too. And then the Cups episode overlapping there. And I could just keep going on and on, y'all. To me, it's just like, wow. If any other Psychonauts have experienced that kind of phenomenon, please comment and let me know, because surely I'm not the only one who's experienced this. But again, to me, this is further validation and further proof for me that this stuff is real, and not only real, but realer than real, because how can regular reality pull something like that off? The only way that something like that is possible, in my opinion, is if there's a higher reality pulling the strings for this lower reality that we're in. And so, once again, either I'm overthinking this, or there's something to do with psychedelics. There's something to do with the visions that you see on psychedelics. There's something to do with the entities that you see on psychedelics. And I just happen to see Jesus, for crying out loud. And so, again, I'm amazed. And so that was very powerful. But the craziest part of this whole experience for me, or maybe not the craziest, but one of the most amazing parts, was when I re-entered the room. Here's what happened there. And so I was in here watching, that scene on Desperate Housewives. Right now my wife is watching The Walking Dead. There she is right there. Say hi.
Hi.
So, got her on camera. But anyway, so I rounded the corner after watching that scene and being blown away by it. Rounded the corner here. I'm just like, can't believe it. I come into the room and this is the first thing that I see right here. 2 shoes awaiting my feet. And now I'm coming into a room that has... I literally walked into a room that has disciple sandals waiting for my arrival. 2 of them perfectly aligned. He said that wasn't an accident. You didn't do that. I did. There are no accidents. There's no way that I would have taken... They still have feet imprints in them. Are those your feet? Am I touching the feet? You said, can I kiss your feet earlier? Can I? He said, kiss them, they're yours. Like he's inviting me. Like you know how we say, oh, it's yours. Like, this house is yours. My house is your house. So he's saying, kiss them, they're yours. In that regard, but he's also saying, kiss them, they are yours. These feet that you kiss are literally your feet. That's why the shoes were awaiting your presence. They were perfectly placed here. This is not me. I don't do this. Where did these shoes come from? They weren't here. Those shoes were not there. I was sitting there. They would have been underneath my left butt cheek, and they were not there. What are they doing there perfectly aligned, sir? For me to walk in and see this? How are they perfectly aligned, awaiting my feet? In this perfect, beautiful symbol of discipleship, obedience. Here are your slippers, sir. Kiss the feet. They are yours. My house is your house. This is how you extend a hand towards Jesus. And he reciprocates that hand 10 billion fold. Y'all, those slippers were not there. Those shoes were not there. They weren't there. I did not wear those shoes today. Eternal life, this guy says. And there are my shoes. And they aren't bespeckled with jewelry.
These shoes served their purpose, which was to put some cushion underneath the man's feet so he didn't wear himself to death on day number 1 of his existence down here. All your gold-plated sneakers, that's all part of it too. I don't want to hear that crap anymore, y'all. These are our sneakers right here. And they aren't sneakers. These are not comfortable. They're not gold-plated. But they are infinite. And we all need to find that in ourselves. Otherwise, we are all doomed. We're going to spell out our own level, the furthest level of forgiveness down here. That people say is like the lowest level of Dante's Inferno. We're in it, y'all, if we don't recognize that which is within ourselves already. Kiss the feet. They're yours. Those are some tough shoes to fill, buddy. It's cosmically terrifying.
And so after that epic monologue, which I actually cut short for this video, but after this epic monologue, I realized I was yabbering too much and missing out on this opportunity here to fill these shoes, right? And so, but before I get to the next part, y'all, I just want to point out I want to zoom in or get close to these and point out that these toe markings here are my toes. Again, these are really old, and after years and years of wear and tear or whatever, my toes have left an imprint on these shoes. But in the moment, these were Jesus's footprints. It's like Jesus put his shoes here for me to wear, and these were his footprints. So when I was like, "Sir, are these your feet? Can I kiss them?" It was like, and it's almost like, when someone, I don't know, takes a shirt or something and they throw it on a bed. Like, I'm just going to throw this shirt that I have laid out that my wife would be angry that I have laid out. But like when you throw something on the bed, you see it kind of like fall, and you see that kind of like that I don't know, the air kind of like pushing out of it, and it takes a while for it to fully depress. It almost had that look to it. I'm not joking around. It's as if when I approached these shoes, it was like someone had just taken their feet out of them, and you could see it kind of like depressing like that. It was very unbelievably amazing, y'all. It was absolutely freaking unbelievably amazing, especially considering that I had no idea how these shoes got here. Like, unbelievable. And so, realizing I was wasting time, though, I went ahead and stepped into the shoes, and immediately upon doing so, y'all, I collapsed. I collapsed in pure and utter exhaustion. I mean, between being smote by the Archangel Gabriel and this epic conversation with Jesus and this cosmically terrifying being that was rotting my face off and throwing diarrhea at me and trying to rip me down into hell, I was exhausted. And so I basically kind of turned my head to Jesus as he kind of started to fade away, and he told me something about sleeping itself, right? Because it's very easy for you to be so passionate and excited about maybe not excitement's probably not the word. It's your duty. You're so bound by duty with what you have to do now that it's very easy to imagine like, oh, well, I'm not going to sleep ever again. Like, every single thing that I do in my life is now going to be devoted to this cause, and there is no sleep. And Jesus basically told me in so many words as he was fading away that that's not how this works. To bring up mountaineering again, it's already courageous for a mountaineer to climb Mount Everest or Mount Denali or something like that, right? But it's absolutely foolish for that mountaineer to choose the hardest impossible path up the mountain. There's a difference between courage and stupidity, right? And so he basically let me know that it's okay to rest. It's okay to sleep. He was human and he slept, and he had to. Otherwise, he would have killed him. He would have died before he would have been able to spread any useful knowledge or information or forgiveness and love. And so basically, he conveyed to me in so many words that there's a handoff, an optimization of sorts, where
you do everything you can in the waking light of day. You do your job, and you don't be lazy, right? You sleep and you rest when the job is done, right? And so, but when that job is done, you hand the baton off to rest. You hand the baton off to sleep, because what happens in sleep? Regeneration, all the regenerative things that happen in sleep, neurogenesis, muscles being rebuilt, flushing toxins out of your body and everything, y'all. It's your body is still working and optimizing what you did the previous day and getting you ready for the next day. And so the optimal, most efficient way of continuing that momentum is to get proper rest and proper sleep. So there's nothing wrong with that. And so he kind of lulled me to sleep in that regard as I went to sleep. And that sleep was quickly interrupted, though, by my wife, who had been waiting to eat, right? I'd only been laying there for maybe 5-10 minutes before my wife came in and said she was hungry, and I was hungry too. And we went to go get some pizza. I'm going to step in here where there's a little more light. It's getting kind of dark here. But I'll just turn on some lights. Why not? But so when we were at the pizza place, a lot of amazing things happened. I wasn't fully done with the experience. I still saw some very trace amount of kind of psychedelic stuff. Like, I mean, you really had to look for it, mind you, but there was still some like intersecting geometric lines and stuff like that. Maybe a tiniest of tiny bit of fractal kind of stuff going on. I didn't drive, by the way. She did. She's stone cold sober. But regardless, I saw a little bit of that stuff. But the things that really popped out at me, pun intended, were eyeballs. Every once in a while, out of the corner of my eye, I would see this flash of these two really intensely staring you down eyeballs, and they were the eyeballs of Jesus Christ. And I know this because I had just got done looking into those eyes for the past like hour and a half. And so everywhere, just about everywhere I'd look, in the corner of my eye, I would see a flash of those eyeballs. And it was quite amazing. But also, whenever I would close my eyes, I would see a flash like staring directly at me. Really, really amazing stuff. And it was kind of like a stark reminder of my mission. Again, his 1,000-yard stare, y'all. It's a commanding presence. It's a call to action. And so these are just like little gentle reminders of what my new task is, right? But one thing that really leapt out at me probably the most in this post experience while I'm having pizza with my wife. By the way, shout out to Gypsy Poet, best pizza in Houston. I'm sitting there in the pizza joint with her, and just like those memes I told you about with the guys picking the fruit or whatever, and then you squint your eyes and hold it out at a distance and you can see the face of Jesus, that happened in that moment, and I have a picture of it. Like, granted, there's a little bit of psychedelic effects still going on, so what I saw looked exactly like the face of Jesus. This picture that I'm going to show you, you're really going to have to use your imagination to see a face here, but I think you'll see a face. I don't think you may not see the face of Jesus, but I think you'll see a face. Like, I see eyeballs there. I see like a beard. I see a nose. It's amazing to me that the very day, a mere like hour, or maybe 2 hours or 2.5 hours after I saw the face of Jesus Christ in one of those like, similar to one of those memes or whatever. That's, when I first saw his face, it was like that. 2.5 hours later, I see that in real life and have a picture of it. It was unbelievable. And so that kind of spelled the end of that experience. That was kind of the last thing. And other than that, my wife and I had an absolutely amazing day. So much love. It was just awesome. And I was confident, based on everything that happened, between the Archangel Gabriel saying that a miracle is going to happen, basically. He says, trust the signs. It'll work, all this stuff. I was confident that we were going to go in for that third ultrasound and get a heartbeat, and that we were going to be good to go with the pregnancy, right? and 9 short months we will have a baby daughter. And so that kind of was the send-off of this extreme confidence. And the integration that happened thereafter, y'all, which always happens after psychedelic experiences, integration and these amazing synchronistic events that echo the themes of the trip. What happened in terms of integration after this trip, y'all, was just heartbreakingly beautiful and amazing. And just, we're going to cover it in part 2 of this trip report. So we're going to do a part 2 covering that. And then we're going to do an unpacking episode of what really happened and what it all means. And, because we all know what happened, right? I had that emotional breakdown. I'm going to put that into perspective and tell you exactly where I am now on my path. And I think where I landed is a place that is actually stronger than I was before, but more vulnerable at the same time. And I'll get into the reasons why on that unpacking episode, y'all. It's going to be absolutely it's going to be intense, and it's going to challenge everything that you thought about my channel, about me, about my takeaways about God and psychedelics and signs and synchronicities and all this stuff, y'all. We kind of have to. I'm going to hold my tongue. I'm going to bite my tongue until that episode comes out, y'all. But that's all I got for today. I appreciate any of you who have stuck around this long. This is another long one. But I actually did cut this one down quite a bit because previous recordings that I did of this were almost 3 hours. So I spared y'all quite a bit. Stuck with only the important stuff. So I love you all, and I'll see you on the next episode. See ya.